Hello and welcome to this special edition of Technology Update. This month we've come to Hamburg in Germany. Once known as the gateway to the world, millions of people left the port city in the 19th and 20th centuries to seek their fortunes in the new world, and bringing with them their local cuisine, including the Hamburg steak, which many believe to be the precursor to the hamburger. Fast forward to today and people are flocking back to the city, and for a very good reason. Being a port city naturally makes Hamburg an international city. Its formula of industry, commerce and history means that millions of sailors and sightseers descend on Germany's second largest municipality every year. Whether it's to lay up in port or take a walk on the wild side on the infamous Reeperbahn. All that's missing from the equation for Tech Up is some scientists. So we went to one of the world's leading particle accelerator centres, DESY, to find them. Tucked away in the sleepy Bahrenfeld quarter, the centre is also an international magnet, attracting over 3,000 researchers from more than 40 countries every year, who come to use the world's most intense X-rays to shine a light on some of the mysteries of the micro-universe. The site has become home to some groundbreaking particle accelerators, but the best is still to come. The European X-ray Free Electron Laser, XFEL. DESY was the first circular accelerator built on the site in the 60s. Work was finished on DESY's sister Doris in '74. Just 4 years later, the world's biggest accelerator at the time, Petra, came onto the scene, and after some serious upgrades is currently the world's brightest source of X-ray radiation. The centre's largest circular accelerator, the now disused Hera, was first fired up in 1990. The shift towards X-ray lasers came with the Free Electron Laser Flash in 2005, followed by the Centre for Free Electron Laser Science in 2012. 3 new buildings have been built for the European XFEL at DESY: the modulator hall for power, the entrance building and the all-important injector complex. The site is already pretty crowded, so we wanted to find out what it would bring to the party.
These sources, which are called free electron lasers, have a much higher brilliance, so much more intense bursts of X-rays, and also they have the characteristics of having much shorter X-ray pulses.
At the DESY site, a laser knocks bunches of electrons out of a chunk of metal. The particles then enter a linear accelerator where resonators push them almost to the speed of light. 1.7 kilometers later and the beam is split at the Oostdorfer Born site. A series of magnets force each particle to emit X-rays that are then sent down 5 tunnels to the experiment hall at Schönefeld. It might not be much to look at now, but the 15-hectare Schönefeld site will be home to the European XFEL's future headquarters directly above the experiment hall. Since ground was broken in 2009, engineers and construction workers have been working all year round, whatever the weather, to get the project finished by the 2017 deadline. But the real groundwork was carried out by 2 boring machines, Tula and Amelie. Together they took just less than 2 years to create XFEL's over 5.5 kilometers of accelerator, light generation and photon tunnels. Almost 6 years on, and there's now light at the end of them. Well, almost. When finished, the European XFEL HQ will have room enough for 350 people, house labs, offices, seminar rooms and a library, but most of the real scientific action will take place below ground. However, the sheer size of the undertaking would be too much for any country to take on alone.
Russia is, after Germany, is the largest contributor, so it's a very big presence in this project. Its participation covers almost 1/4 of the total. And then, of course, Russia is a very big science country, has a very long tradition going back for centuries. So the intellectual contribution is also very important. And we have a sizable fraction in our staff, scientific staff, and also engineering and technical staff are Russians. And of course, we also hope that when the operation starts and when really the real experiments, that many people from Russian universities and Russian institutes will come and participate in the experiments. So there is a financial but also an intellectual contribution.
Early particle accelerators started, well, accelerating particles at the end of the 1920s and beginning of the 30s. Many of them were circular and used a combination of magnetic and electric fields to push particles to ridiculous speeds, but there were limits. That is, until a breakthrough came in 1944 when Soviet experimental physicist Vladimir Vexler came up with a theory of phase stability. He proposed that by syncing the magnetic and electric field strengths with the increasing particle momentum, a constant orbit could be maintained and higher velocities reached. A year later, and completely unaware of Vexler's publication, American physicist Edwin McMillan came up with the same idea and built the first synchrotron in 1945. They both received the Atoms for Peace Prize in '63. To this day, synchrotrons are still one of the pillars of particle physics research, and we've come to the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow to see one in action. Benign Sounding Laboratory No. 2 was founded in 1943 with the initial purpose of developing nuclear weapons. Now known as the Kurchatov Institute, it has long since focused its extensive experience with particles on more peaceful purposes. The radiation produced by early accelerators was initially labelled parasitic as an unwanted byproduct. But once scientists realised how useful it was renamed synchrotron radiation, and now they can't get enough of it. The synchrotron at the Institute was officially opened in '99, making it the first mega science project since the fall of the USSR. It now racks up over 2,000 hours of beam time a year and won't be retiring anytime soon.
You see, here we have huge currents that generate a lot of heat, which requires a very complex cooling system. Inside, there's a vacuum, like in space. Just imagine how complex all this equipment is. A lot of electric energy is applied to accelerate the electrons. And here, inside this aluminium chamber, an electron beam travels at the speed of light. And then you have complex magnetic systems that focus that beam, direct it, and maintain it. This is an extremely complex electrophysical system, and all of it has been made in Russia. Russian experts designed it, made the blueprints, and manufactured every part. All of it. There are very few countries in the world that can do this, you understand. When it comes to the nuclear industry, Russia has always been one of the leading countries. Russia and the US were competing in this field, moving forward and creating new technology. We've always been a great country in terms of scientific progress, and a great country we will remain.
You're not going to stay up there long with the scientific heavyweights by treading water. The Kurchatov Institute is constantly modernizing its 2+ gen synchrotron to produce more stable, powerful and brighter beams, and has already started drawing up plans to skip a generation and produce a 4th gen source. But as is often the case, the operating principle of these machines is much simpler than the kit itself. An electron gun fires packets of electrons through a linear accelerator to a small booster ring. Here the energy of the particles is increased from 80 mega-electron volts to 450. Now this is enough energy for some experiments, but if you need more, the electrons can be injected into the 125-meter circumference storage ring. The packets of electrons build up, reaching an energy of 2.5 giga-electron volts, and a series of magnets, undulators and high-tech sounding wigglers focus and bend the beam. When the path of the high-speed, high-energy electrons is bent, the particles emit bright electromagnetic or synchrotron radiation. The radiation, in this case X-rays, travels along the beamlines to the radiation-shielded end stations. Given the number of bending magnets, up to 24 beamlines could be installed on this synchrotron. Each beamline can support multiple end stations, which segment and focus the synchrotron light into the required wavelength and size. The Kurchatov Institute currently has 19 so-called hutchers in operation, with another 6 in the pipeline, including 2 from Doris in Germany. In this particular station, researchers are analysing lab-grown bioorganic films, resembling the membranes surrounding living cells. At just 1 or 2 molecules thick, they're made from a combination of lipids and proteins and protect cells as well as control the exchange of substances. By hitting the film with synchrotron light, the scientists can study the biological and chemical processes that occur inside the cells and how they're affected when, say, we take medicines or catch a virus, all on a molecular level. This may ultimately lead to the development of revolutionary new treatments, but the scope for study with synchrotron light is limitless. The experiments carried out in the end stations can be split into 3 main types: spectroscopy, diffraction and absorption. Or, in other words, by knowing the characteristics of the beam and measuring the extent to which it's diffracted or absorbed as it travels through the sample, scientists can generate high-resolution 3D images of the molecular structure of pretty much anything. This new hutch contains a state-of-the-art goniometer, which allows samples to be precisely rotated. A series of detectors fix the position of the diffracted rays, and this massive information is sent to a supercomputer to make sense of it. By using this technique, scientists can open a window into the internal workings of physical, chemical, geological, and biological processes.
Hard X-rays have a wavelength of approximately 1 angstrom, which is comparable to the distance between atoms in a crystal. So by using diffraction, we can determine the atomic arrangement. The synchrotron, thanks to its exceptionally bright, hard X-rays, allows us to determine the atomic arrangement very accurately.
Just a stone's throw away from the accelerator complex, you'll find the Kurchatov Institute's protein facility. It's here that the protein samples for the synchrotron are produced using a technique called expression cloning. The researchers receive the chemically synthesized genes in the form of a powder, which is then dissolved. A small electric current is passed through the solution and it's checked to see if the required genes are there. In a process called electropermeabilization, another current is applied to the host, which in this case is E. coli bacteria, and this destroys the cell membrane, letting the new genes in and reprogramming the bacteria to produce a specific protein. They are then fermented in a nutrient solution under carefully controlled temperature and oxygen conditions. After anything from 1 day to a week, the bacteria are destroyed and the required protein is isolated from the mixture. But it's not just a case of taking the protein, sticking it in the synchrotron and seeing what comes out the other end. To withstand the intense X-rays long enough to get a snapshot of what's going on inside, it has to be crystallized, and that's where it gets a bit tricky. First of all, not all proteins can be crystallized, and secondly, those that do often don't make crystals large enough to be studied, and the minimum size is around 50 microns. Currently, the structure, or the various combinations of amino acids, of around 90,000 different proteins has been determined, which may sound like a lot, but it's only a drop in the ocean compared to the millions out there. So as we can see, the synchrotron and the supporting facilities at the Kurchatov Institute do their job and do it well. So why go to all the expense and effort of building a more powerful machine like XFEL? To understand why, we wanted to explain it to ourselves in more simple terms. Imagine for 1 second that you want to take a picture of a fast-moving object, such as this racing car. Back in the day, we were forced to use low-tech cameras with a slow-speed film like this. We've come to the Moscow racetrack to conduct a little experiment and try and snap the cars in action. As you can see, even in broad daylight, with a film speed of 50 ISO, the aperture wide open, and an exposure of 1/100th of a second, the camera can register the still background without a flash, but not freeze the cars in their tracks. The picture will either be too dark or so blurred that you can't make anything out. We have two options: either make the sun brighter, which we can't do, or use new digital sensors instead of slow films, which will allow us to increase the speed of the shutter and stop down the aperture to get a crystal clear shot of the cars out on the track. There are still a few applications where old-fashioned cameras come in handy, but for more demanding tasks, you need to harness the latest technology. Just as digital cameras revolutionized photography, the European XFEL will help us see the micro-universe in a higher resolution and frame rate than we've ever seen it before. The facility would generate up to 27,000 X-ray bursts per second and billions of times brighter than synchrotrons. This will not only let us see atoms and molecules, but actually film them as they rearrange during a chemical reaction. It'll all happen so fast that proteins will no longer have to be crystallized to withstand the X-rays. So in theory, you could put a living plant cell in there and watch it as it converted carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen, which, if we could copy it, could have huge consequences for renewable energy sources.
When we use a synchrotron light source to collect data and diffraction images over, say, a few minutes, we can't capture any of the intermediate phases when the protein undergoes any sort of change. With the free electron laser, thanks to its extremely short pulses, We can take images very quickly and capture these intermediate phases.
And this means that we'll be able to closely study the processes going on in the human body, which will lead to breakthroughs in medical technology, a completely new approach to creating pharmaceuticals and any other material. There are a number of projects. Just think about it. You need to make a list of all the physical and technical processes that take place on a femtosecond timescale. And there you have it, your research areas.
But such rewards don't come cheap. 12 countries have chipped in over €1 billion in cash and equipment to build the European XFEL. 10 EU countries have given between 1% and 3%. Russia's contributed almost 27% and Germany well over 1/2 of the total. And we'll be going back there after this break. Welcome back. Many of the scientists and experts we've spoken to so far during the show have been working in their respective fields for decades. But everyone has to start somewhere. And perhaps this next event is where Russia's next generation of scientists will get their leg up.
Focal Point.
This month saw the Olympic city of Sochi host another international event, the World Robot Olympiad. Held as part of the Sochi Robotics Days, this year marked the 11th time the WRO took place. It drew in over 1,000 young people and their robotic creations from 47 countries, uniting them through science and technology. Russia entered 44 teams from 14 regions who competed in all 4 categories: regular, open, robot football and college. As part of the business programme, Science and Education Minister Dmitry Livanov took to the stage to stress the importance of tech in education. At the end of the 3-day competition, Thailand took home 7 medals. Other top teams included Hong Kong, Kazakhstan, China, Japan, Indonesia and the US. Russia walked away with 5 medals, with Moscow, St. Petersburg and the Ulyanovsk region among the winners. Back in Hamburg, all's quiet above ground, so we headed underground. The injector complex at DESY is located 40 meters below the surface, and it's here that the particles start their 3.4-kilometer journey to the experiment hall in Schönefeld. The linear accelerator consists of a series of yellow modules with niobium resonators, which are supercooled to minus 271 degrees C by liquid helium. This reduces their electrical resistance to nothing, so 100% of the electricity pumped in is converted into microwaves to push the electrons to the speed of light.
The construction of this machine is at the very limits of current human capabilities. That often results in new technologies and breakthroughs in a wide range of areas. So, when you're fully involved in this project, you get access to all the know-how and technological solutions.
6 years, 540,000 cubic meters of soil, 152,000 cubic meters of concrete, and 30,000 tons of steel later, and construction work is complete. All that remains now is to breathe life into it. Here at Schönefeld, 25 meters below ground, they've already kitted out the main testing facility with an air conditioning system fit for a 5-story building and concrete radiation-proof instrument enclosure. Equipment and materials for the European XFEL are constantly being shipped in from all over Europe by the lorry load. And we made it back to DESY just in time to meet this shipment of magnets all the way from St. Petersburg. The magnets are just one example of the many in-kind contributions countries are making to bring the European XFEL to life.
This is one of the quadrupole magnets made by our Russian colleagues at the Yefremov Research Institute in St. Petersburg. It'll make up yet another component of this big device we're building here in Hamburg to produce X-rays with unique characteristics.
The quadrupole magnets are located between undulator segments and act a bit like lenses, tightly focusing the electron beam. The Yefremov Research Institute in Russia's northern capital has a long-standing relationship with Hamburg, providing some of the magnets for Petra 2 and 3. And in 2011, the centre set about making magnets for the European XFEL. Just 2 years later, they'd already produced and supplied 415 of their total 715 in-kind contribution. The Institute is providing dipole, quadrupole, sextupole and corrector magnets which weigh anything from a couple of kilos to around 7 tons. And each one of them has to be tested before being put in place. During the so-called fiducialization process, the centre of the magnetic field is determined and marked on the exterior of the magnet to ensure it's correctly installed in relation to the electron beam. And while we're on the subject, without magnetic undulators, the European XFEL wouldn't be possible at all.
These devices are the brainchild of Vitaly Ginzburg, a prominent Soviet astrophysicist and Nobel laureate. In the late 1940s, he wrote a seemingly impractical article about the movement of a relativistic electron. That is, moving it around the speed of light in a periodic electromagnetic field and its undulatory motion. Back then, it wasn't much use to anyone. But today, a whole industry manufacturing complex devices, free electron lasers, is based entirely on this principle. And it's worth billions.
The undulator is a device that makes radiation brighter and more coherent. It consists of 2 long rows of alternating dipole magnets, and as bunches of electrons travel along the undulator, the magnetic field causes them to oscillate. It's this constant change in velocity that causes the electrons to emit X-rays. Initially used as insertion devices in synchrotrons to adjust the radiation properties, undulators are the only way of coaxing radiation out of electrons in 4th-gen sources like XFEL, which will contain 91 modules. But why so many? As the radiation overtakes the electrons, it causes some to speed up and others to slow down, self-assembling into thin disks. But they take some time to do so, and that's why free electron lasers require so many undulators. All the electrons in each disk emit their light in sync, resulting in bright, coherent, rapid X-ray flashes. Each 8-ton undulator has to be finely tuned to ensure the quality of the X-rays. To start off, a semiconducting probe runs the length of the device. As it travels along the magnets, it produces a small voltage which is measured to create a complete map of the magnetic field. Any fluctuations outside the normal range are registered and linked to the 250 poles in the module. They're then tilted, raised or lowered micron by micron to produce a completely even field. This has to be carried out for all 559 meters of undulators, so I'd better leave them to it. The Centre for Free Electron Laser Science, CFEL, was set up to unite experts in all the various research areas to make the most out of next-generation light sources. And it's not the only one looking forward to the launch of the European XFEL. Future users of the machine have been meeting since 2007. They can now be counted in their thousands and are all queuing up to get allocated some precious beam time. Their proposals will be reviewed by experts based on scientific merit and not money or materials their country has contributed to the project. Before getting their hands on the big guns, scientists and students alike come to hone their research skills and put some of their theories to the test at the world's first X-ray free electron laser, FLASH. The free electron laser in Hamburg started operation in 2005 and holds the record for the world's fastest film, with the time between images being a snappy 50 trillionths of a second. As a small-scale prototype for the European XFEL, its unique characteristics make it the ideal place for students to get in some valuable extracurricular study. However, beam time on FLASH is in demand and places are hotly contested.
I have a pretty large group of students from different Russian universities. They come from the Kurchatov Research Institute, the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, and other universities and institutes as well. It's the students that bring my ideas together and implement them, and they help me to move forward, and this in turn generates even more ideas, and that's how we grow.
For every 3 to 4 research proposals received, only one is approved by the expert panel. There are other free electron lasers dotted around the globe, like the LINAC coherent light source at Stanford University and the compact Spring 8 in Japan. There's also one in the pipeline in Switzerland and another on the way in South Korea. But in terms of specifications, the European XFEL will blow them all out of the water.
Hopefully, the students will use this experience that they gain from my group, and they'll be able to apply it if they work on the European XFEL. And over time, they'll be able to supervise their own research groups. I believe this is the most important thing.
As the launch date draws nearer, interest in the project is mounting, and media from around the world are coming to get one last glimpse of the equipment before it disappears below ground. The European XFEL will allow us to view the atomic universe and its processes in unprecedented detail and clarity. But whatever secrets it unlocks, one thing's for sure: only through such tight international cooperation would the project be possible. Certainly food for thought. Undertaking XFEL alone would be a bite too large for any single country to chew. So let's say this juicy hamburger represents XFEL. As host country, Germany has contributed just over a half, Russia's given just over a quarter, and the 10 remaining European states have provided these bite-sized pieces. But we'll have to wait for around 2 years to find out who makes the meatiest scientific discovery. So until then, enjoy the ride.